What's up, everyone? This is Basementside. I'm Deeg. I'm here today with my friend Alen Lapidis. Am I saying your name right?
Yeah, Lapidus. That's
La-
good.
How's it going, Alan?
It's going good.
Pleased to hear that. Um, why don't you introduce yourself to the fine folks?
I'm Alan Lapidus. I'm a principal artist at Rogue Planet Games and currently the environment lead on Planetside 2 franchise. Um, I was the environment lead at the initial Planetside 2 launch, so it's good to be back on the project and pushing the art.
Excellent. We've seen a lot of new art coming into the game in the last year. It's been an exciting time to be a Planetside fan and onlooker, I think. And I want to do show off some of your work there. I think I have Sanctuary right behind me. Something
Yeah,
you worked on, right, Alan?
yeah. Me and Carlos Rodriguez and wow, it's the end of the day. My brain's a little fried. And Josh Sorensen.
Carlos and
And
Josh.
Chris Bishop helped us out as well.
Ah, Chris Bishop, that's a name that I recognize from a long way back as well. He's been around.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so I think that a lot of the discussions I'm used to having with Planetside players and streamers and stuff like that is kind of about design, gameplay design. Having actually talking to you as an artist is a bit of a new thing to me. So I wonder if I could ask you to indulge me by telling me a little bit about what an environment lead does versus what a principal artist does, what the overlap is. Just help me understand what that means.
Sure. So a principal artist is really your title in the company, as in junior or associate, junior, full-time, senior, senior two, principal. It's kind of like as high as you can go as an artist.
Hmm.
The role is the environment lead, and it's my responsibility to manage large projects, assign them if we have resources, work with outsourcers, design a lot of what we're looking at based on the initial blockout that the designers will hand me. They'll say they need a play space that meets these bullet points. Then I'll block something out, I'll present it to them. And once we've kind of found a middle ground where we like everything, we go in and I kind of direct the style. Sometimes I do concept art, sometimes I just hit the ground running.
Very cool. So is there overlap then between like the idea in my head, which I apologize for because it's just in my head, of like an old school like shooter level designer who's kind of blocking out play spaces for actual combat and the art piece on top of it?
No, that would be our designers. So, like
Okay.
in the new facility I'm working on, the blockout was created by Kevin Moyer, one of our designers. And, he takes into account all those things like line of sight and flow and uh, defender versus attacker balance and any new gimmicks he wants to put in. And then I'll take his block out and I'll further refine it and present another block out back. We'll have a discussion. Uh, a roundtable discussing what we like, what doesn't work, what our
Mhm.
goals are, and then it gets handed back to me where I start actually making the art that fits those hallway layout and rooms.
Got it. So you work hand in hand with the
Yeah,
people who design the play spaces.
for sure.
So what kind of considerations do you take into account when you're sitting down to actually make art for the places we love inhabiting?
Well, I try and play on the strengths of the Forge Light engine, where its exterior lighting is really good.
Mhm.
Its interior lighting could use a lot of love,
Mm.
but I try and leverage more geometry now. In the old days, we relied a lot on textures and
Mhm.
on normal maps, if you're familiar with those.
Yes.
It's basic. So, for anyone who doesn't know, normal maps are basically red, green, blue information baked to an image texture. And when it's presented on a 3D model, it can fake the illusion of depth, creating seams, rises, and falls to a degree. It doesn't actually deform the geometry, so it has to be
Mhm.
pretty shallow. In the old days, we used to rely heavily on putting all that information in the textures. But then our textures got really big. We had to compress the textures down for performance.
Mhm.
And a lot of that started looking muddy. So these days, I'm trying to rely more on poly count, which today's video cards can push. ridiculous numbers of polys.
Mhm.
So I'm relying more on geometry and ambient occlusion, which is a pass that happens after everything is rendered that creates shadow information in
Mhm.
corners and cavities. And so that helps the game look a lot better for the interiors. And also just shape language, does it feel like nanite systems? Does it feel like what we traditionally know as nanite systems? Does it feel like a more modern nanite systems? Because nanite systems is always evolving in the background.
Uh-huh.
The, the factions have their shape language and they're pretty faithful to it, but nanite systems is constantly evolving technology that the factions are not aware of.
What would you say the current state of the design language for Nanite systems is at?
Well, nanite system still has the same sort of off-white to khaki palette,
Mhm.
but and it still has chamfered edges rather than bevels. You'll see a lot of cylinders and rounded forms for TR.
Okay.
You'll see S curves, C curves, and scalloped elements for VS.
Yeah.
For NC, you'll definitely see a lot of boxy rectangular elements.
Uh-huh.
Um, and then for NS, it's that color palette. It's usually that charcoal, that mid-tone off-white, and then you'll see some chrome or silvery accents and emissives and some cabling, but mostly the shape language is chamfered corners.
And did you use those design languages when you were putting together, say, you worked on the new Endeavor weapons, right?
I did, yeah,
How much of that was you?
all of it.
All of
I
it.
mean, the art wise.
That's what I thought. So you didn't actually go through and make all the pew pew sounds yourself, did you?
No, that was that was Homero, our sound designer, and he was excited to put in something that sounded a little more video gamey, and it sounded awesome.
Shout out to him. I actually love it.
Yeah,
I have to tell you though, as someone who's been primarily a Vanu player throughout my Planetside
mhm,
career, sharing the pew pew with the other factions, I feel sometimes it feels a little bit like, hey, like that's my thing. But
yeah,
it depends on how I'm feeling that day. Sometimes I'm like, the pew pew can just go around. Everyone can love this lasery goodness. I'm actually showing on the stream right now some of the Endeavor weapons, which are gorgeous. So you used a bunch of really great words there. Things like midtones, chamfered edges, and I think I'm seeing some of those things here. I'm a, when it comes to art, I'm what would the word be? An idiot, I think,
no,
perhaps.
no,
Um,
it's all technical terminology. I
I learned
mean,
pretty early what my calling was, and that was not it. But these are gorgeous weapons, Alan.
thank you.
From a complete layman. I love all the detail on them. The midtones is like so stuff that's not super dark or super bright, but kind of like halfway between. Is that what that means?
Exactly, yeah. Usually you have a three-tone palette to start with, which is your darks, your mid-tone, which is your the majority of it,
Uh
and
huh.
your highlights. And
Yeah.
where the darks and the highlights are, you'll get the highest amount of contrast,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where your eye will be drawn.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing that will draw your eye are three things: a lot of detail, a lot of small, busy elements, high contrast, lights next to darks, and primary colors and emissives.
Okay.
So you want to like spread things out to create a nice balance that helps the brain easily read the major forms before it says, "Ooh, there's some interesting stuff over here, and I'll focus on that."
Uh huh.
But the brain needs to be able to take the whole thing in the beginning and enjoy it, and
Yeah.
then it can appreciate the small stuff.
Yeah. I think that what you just described is exactly my experience of it. Like, first blush, wow, these look great. And then the more my eyes spend time on it, the more I pick out stuff to be like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, that looks nice. I like the way that's
Yeah.
proportioned. The coloring, what you said about the highlights and the
Mhm.
contrast, I can totally pick those out. The finer details around one of the weapons I'm looking at right now on the stream, like there's a bunch of like kind of like a mesh around the grip. So my eyes are drawn to the grip
Yeah,
because there's those fine details in the writing. Also, whenever there's writing, um, that kind of stuff.
because the
So
writing is a
so Al
primary color.
Alan,
Yeah.
how did you come to art? Like, is this like a lifelong calling for you that ended up coming to video games, or was it video games into art? How did that kind of work?
I mean, I was always drawing as a kid,
Okay.
just terrible doodles. But I got a job in retail at the mall near my house. I worked at a old store called Babbage's,
Oh,
which was
yeah.
yeah, which was a competitor to like EB Games and GameStop, and I think that was before GameStop actually. But and then from there, um, someone from Interplay came by, and I helped them out with some technical stuff because I had a home computer, so I knew about setting up AutoExec BAT and config sys and all that junk that you needed to know to get games to run on the old 386s.
Oh, wow.
And so I was knowledgeable, and he said, you know, you should come by. I'll put my name down as a reference. I did that. I got the job, worked at Interplay for a while, and then decided to go elsewhere. Went to Blizzard, which was actually in the same office park as Interplay.
Mhm.
Um, and then worked in tech support for Blizzard, but I was always looking for my opportunity to get into development. And when that opportunity presented itself during Warcraft 3, I helped out with those rendering those cinematics, doing cloth simulation.
Oh, cool.
So, like, the one I worked on the most was that scene with Thrall and Hellscream fighting Manaroth. If I don't know if anyone gets that reference, but
We're gonna show it on the stream. That's way too specific not to Warcraft lore. Grom and Thrall kill Manaroth and free the Horde.
yeah,
Okay.
and then Hellscream sacrifices himself.
Yes, I know
But yeah,
exactly what you're talking about.
yeah, and so there was a lot of like braids and tassels flying around from. I think it was Thrall had his hair in braids, so I had to do a lot of that's done via simulations. So I worked on that stuff, and then I was able to return for an opportunity internally. Blizzard was looking for level designers
Mhm.
amongst. It was looking externally and internally, and so I was able to use their tools, put together a level, show them that I had a good eye for composition, and then I got hired onto World of Warcraft and worked on many of the World of Warcraft vanilla zone.
That's exciting. So
Yeah.
at the time you were working on World of Warcraft, how many people were also working on the game?
Oh man, I'd have to like literally count them in my head. I want to say probably 50 or 70.
Okay. Early days. So the
Yeah, I
vanilla
mean
release.
there was like four of us in our office. There was like three guys in the next office. Like I literally have to think office by office and count the
Uh-huh.
people to get a tally. But
So
yeah, it was a lot of fun.
so you got your break and you're actually doing this kind of get a chance to do this artistic work on World of Warcraft. At that time, like, did you have a sense of, like, being in a moment, or was it just like, "I'm excited to do what I do, I'm gonna sit down and focus on it?" Like, what was that
Oh,
like?
I was a big EverQuest player and
Uh-huh.
Ashram's Call player.
Okay.
So I enjoyed those early days of 3D MMOs. Uh, and then I was so excited that Blizzard was doing an MMO, especially, you know, their art was so innovative at the time.
Mhm.
Like you only really saw that sort of stylized painterly look in like early Pixar movies and Blizzard. I mean,
Mhm.
nowadays it's ubiquitous.
Yeah.
Nowadays you're seeing more stylized realism even.
Yeah. Mm.
Uh, but it was yeah, it was fantastic and a lot of talented people, a lot of fun. It was exciting, and there was always this thrill that you're working for Blizzard, which is like one of the biggest names in the industry.
Even back then. That's awesome.
Yeah, even back then. I mean, I can't think of anyone who was bigger than Blizzard at the time.
Yeah. Well, at that time, they had done StarCraft, the Warcraft, all the Warcraft games, like you mentioned, World of Warcraft coming out. I mean,
Diablo. Yeah.
Diablo, of course. Um, I guess it's easy to look at Blizzard now and think about them back then being small by comparison, but compared to the rest of the industry, they were still pretty huge.
Yeah, I mean, we had like four sections of a fairly large office park building. I think the company in total must have had a couple hundred people working and supporting the different products, and QA and tech support were in there as well.
Yeah, it may just be like Google algorithming or me or something, but I feel like I've noticed a bit of a trend of like old people who not old people who worked on the old original World of Warcraft coming out as and being more involved in the creator scene and streaming and just talking about the experience of working on the original game. Um,
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was definitely a fantastic experience. Anybody who's in dev will tell you that if you get on a project that is a huge success, it opens so many doors for you. And the same with film, you
Uh-huh.
know? You could be this could be your first film gig, but if you're in the credits of whatever, Lord of the Rings,
Mhm.
it's gonna open so many doors for you on the next project you go on, and that's what Warcraft did for me, because when Vivendi purchased, Blizzard, part of it was Blizzard was already deeply in debt for the development of World of Warcraft.
Uh-huh.
And so, as part of that, Vivendi asked Blizzard to do a series of layoffs right when after the product shipped.
Ugh, of course.
Yeah,
That's
and
hell.
so people who were making too much, who were like whatever, whatever the things were, got let go. So I got let go as well,
Mhm.
but there was a really nice severance package, and I invested that in further education. And then after that, I went back and looked who else was big in the industry, and it was SOE at the time.
Okay. So that would have been early mid 2000s, right?
I want to say it was like 1 year after WoW was released, whatever
Sure.
that is,
I think that's 2005. So mid
something like
2000s,
that.
SOE. And what did you work on when you landed at SOE?
So SOE wanted to do a kids stylized painterly game to compete with Wizard 101 and RuneScape, and they wanted it to be uh, family friendly. They wanted to be streaming. So this was before everything was streaming. They wanted no downloads. They wanted to be free to play.
Hmm.
So this was at the inception of that whole like paradigm. And they brought me on to work on Free Realms, which is what you see in my portfolio, that
Yeah.
Seussian, almost Burton-esque style mixed in with WoW, but at lower res textures because we were streaming, so we couldn't push the fidelity that WoW had.
Mhm. Now, I don't know a lot about Free Realms. What was that title like?
It was a fun title. The idea was you had fairies and humans and whimsical trolls and elves, and they all lived in, like I said, this like Seussian, Tim Burton-esque fantasy world. But the idea was that it was, how do I explain it? It was a little bit like you had all these mini games scattered throughout this open sandbox world, and the mini games allowed you to collect classes and upgrade your classes. There was combat, there were outfits, there was microtransactions in the store. There was all sorts of amazing animation and character design on it that made it just look like this crazy mishmash of cartoon elements. Like you could
Mhm.
ride a giant cartoon squid, throw down a boombox, and everyone's dancing Thriller.
That's pretty cool. That's great MMO stuff.
Yeah, yeah, it's really crazy.
Um, and, I'm definitely seeing some of what you're talking about where they're trying to hook into what was successful with World of Warcraft with some of that similar
Yeah.
stuff and the stuff you're showing on your portfolio. Um, I gotta ask, Alan, just like morbid curiosity. But I'm just totally curious, like if you have any stories from those times that you want to tell, or any particular interesting anecdotes about working on those games, because I feel like these games, both the original World of Warcraft and Free Realms, and I'm sure some other stuff you worked on during those years too, in like the mid to early 2000s. Um, they're kind of like part of gaming lore. I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, World of Warcraft was a fantastic experience. I worked with a lot of really talented people, and it was fun watching other, IPs being developed. During the development of World of Warcraft, Ghost was being developed, the StarCraft console title.
Right.
And so it was kind of fun, to see the way the game was kind of being designed one way, then being designed another, and ultimately that's what caused its cancellation.
That was in
There was
development hell, kind of. It just
Yeah, unfortunately, they didn't know if it was going to be an action adventure game, more of a Metal Gear stealth game.
hmm.
Because I mean, StarCraft, you want to mow down, hordes of Zerg, right?
Mhm.
Zerg? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And sorry, and
The origination of the term.
you're right, but as a ghost, you're supposed to be a stealth character.
Mhm.
So they really didn't know how they wanted it to go, and then but they had a lot of really great story, and it really brought that world to life. You got to go to like a Protoss world and interact with Protoss. What could have been.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then there were other titles that they tried. I know that they spoke about this, but they wanted to do Warcraft Adventures.
Mhm.
That was a point and click action or a point and click game in the style of the old Sierra games like King's Quest.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah. That unfortunately didn't pan out. They were trying to work with a third party to do the art, but the tone didn't quite land
Mm,
and it was too slow in development.
mhm.
Um, yeah. And it was just fantastic environment on WoW. Like you could walk into Adam Adham's office, who was like the CEO of one of the CEOs of the company with Mike Morheim, and you could just he was open to talk and chit chat about ideas on where the game is going to plan to do things. I remember adamantly trying to pitch Death Knights in vanilla, and I was like, "We gotta have Death Knights, man! Like, I love playing a Shadow Knight in EQ, and there's nothing like that in WoW."
Uh-huh,
And he was like, "Man, maybe later, but we just got so much we're trying to pack in,
uh-huh.
and I hear you, but thematically, where is it going to live? Like, you can't just have Death Knights rolling around Lordaeron."
Yeah, yeah. You gotta pack a good excuse for him, and they packed in a fantastic excuse
Yeah,
with, bundling it in with, the expansion about Arthas, so
for sure.
smart.
So yeah, it was just fun and really a great experience.
Mhm. That's awesome, Ellen. And, I have 1,000 questions bubbling up in my head. Um, I guess, like, one of the questions I have okay, people with open doors, things change over time, industry trends, how do you find working on games, um, hmm, maybe this question isn't well enough formed in my head. Oh, let's move on. We can come back to it if it jumps out at me. This is something that I do. Um, so World of Warcraft, they lay off a bunch of people, launch into SOE, starting on Free Realms. What's next?
Well, after Free Realms had its success. It was doing well. And then I believe my next project was Clone Wars Adventures.
Hmm.
And yeah, Clone Wars Adventures was they wanted hand painted textures, so I had the experience for that, and I was the environment lead there. We got to work with LucasArts, and we got access to their vault of photography from the sets.
That's exciting.
Yeah, so I was just being able to surf at like a lot of the sets and props and kind of see what is outside the boundaries of the camera.
Ooh.
So yeah, it was really useful and helpful for getting a sense of like what does Coruscant buildings look like up close? What's in the Jedi Temple that you don't see,
Mhm.
except for that one hallway they always seem to walk down.
Right, the hallway.
Yeah, the hallway. And so we were able to kind of take the style of the Clone Wars Adventures TV show and translate that into a hand painted texturally style that was very close to the show.
Mhm,
Um, and it once again, it was a little bit like Free Realms, but it was more like you had a central hub like Destiny, where it was the Jedi Temple. You would kind of run around, socialize, and interact with people, and then there's mini games in each of the rooms. So there was a tower defense mini game, a lightsaber dueling. There was speeder racing, which was like Space Harrier. You would fly around the screen and dodge things and shoot it.
okay.
It was on rails, but it was really great because like there would be huge space battles, and you'd have massive like starships coming in from the side of the screen, and you're like, "Oh my god, am I going to hit it?" And then like the rail takes you up and over and down into the hangar bay. It was actually really cinematic.
Yeah, a lot of those old rail games were quite cinematic. Think of, like,
Yeah.
Rebel Assault is another game that floats to mind.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that was fun, and I got to work with great people, and I had a lot of fun on that project. It was a great to have a Star Wars game
Mhm,
on my CV as well. And then after that, I got pulled over to environment lead on a new project that they were starting up called Planetside Next, which
mhm.
later became Planetside 2.
Okay.
They had
S
done some prototyping with the technology to see how they could push the look of the game and how is it going to be more MMO-y with inventory, or is it going to be more like moment to moment gunplay like Battlefield?
and how do those conversations go?
Well,
What's
I
your
mean, that was
recollection?
mostly yeah, I mean, that was mostly Higby, kinda
Uh-huh.
steering the design of the game, and Trammell steering, like, the quality of the art.
Mhm.
Trammell really, like, had a vision for what he wanted the fidelity of the game to look like, and so,
And how did you plug into that? What was your role at that time?
Oh, well, I was managing the artists we had for the environment. I mean, we were making
Mhm.
all of these maps and structures and buildings and new textures. And I was doing project management as well as art creation,
Got it.
working on a lot of the zones, textures, placing stuff, composition. Yeah, I mean,
So
it was great. A lot of fun.
that's cool. And hearing those names, Matt Higbee, T. Ray,
Mhm.
definitely rings the bell of a lot of Planetside players who've been around. Um, you worked on and helped manage the art and the environment design for Emerish, Indar, and Esamir. All three of those big
That's
boys.
correct. Yeah.
Okay. Uh,
I can't tell you exactly what I did on each of them because I don't really recall, but I was touching a lot of things. I was making assets, I was working on textures, I was doing lighting.
mhm.
I was just bouncing around a lot, handing stuff off or providing feedback or doing paint overs, working with outsourcers.
So it sounds like you kind of wore a few different hats.
Yeah. I mean, that's what a lead has to do.
Yeah.
Being able to actually do art is sometimes a luxury, depending
Interesting.
how much you have to manage. We had a team of about, I want to say 12 environment artists for Planetside 2.
Mhm.
So, and we were pretty well managed with Scrum, so we always knew what was coming down the pipe and how long it would take. And we sat in a big open area with design, so there was a lot of collaboration going on as the art was being made.
Mhm. I'm trying to remember what I can about anecdotes about the development of Planetside. The sense I have is that it was pretty rapid development period. Do you remember how long the game was in the oven before it got to retail?
Well, I know that Planetside Next was in development for some time, and that was
Uh-huh.
the foundation for the Forge Light technology, and some of the game
Right,
models
with the
were
new
already
engine.
created. Yeah, so some of the game models were already created.
Mhm.
By the time I came on, they had much of that technology and tools for getting the art in the game set up, and some of it was being developed still. So we hit the ground running and started making our first zone, Indar, and building the ships and the cockpits and all that stuff.
What jumps out at you as something from that period that you're especially proud of?
I have a funny anecdotal story. Proud of, I mean, I'm proud of everything that we created.
Uh-huh.
I know that a lot of settings had to be like toned down. Like the game was visually really impressive, and
Mhm.
the sense of flight was fantastic. But I know that some of the sky settings had to be removed or toned down.
Mhm.
Some of the objects got removed, the textures down resed in order for performance. Because
Right.
there's always going to be people who want, that 160 FPS. So they'll
I'm one
turn
of
every
them.
yeah,
I play
so
with
they'll turn
potato
everything
settings.
off.
I didn't want to. I was gonna, wondering how far into this I get before admitting it to you. I feel a little bad about it talking to the principal artist, but yeah,
Ah,
I
it,
I
it's okay.
I do screen archery with Ultra, and I do the actual gameplay with potato. It's a push pull,
Yeah,
man. It's tough.
yeah.
How do you feel about that?
I mean, I wish that shadows were not as big of a performance hit
Right.
because shadows are so much part of the formula
Uh huh.
of what you see. And because of the way the lighting is calculated, especially for outdoors. So when you go into an interior and you have shadows off, it's like there's no roof. You're
Yeah.
getting the sun glaring off everything and it's just harsh.
Yeah. Yeah. It feels kind of weird, but you're right.
Yeah.
Shadows have historically and continue to, in all games, have a relatively high
Yep.
performance cost
Yeah.
versus the visual benefit you get.
Could we pause for 1 second?
Yeah. Need a
I'll be right
break?
back.
No worries.
Yeah, I just need to.
Yep. All right, folks. We're breaking for a couple minutes. Yeah, those Reddit posts that come up every once in a while, looking back at the way the game looked originally. You can thank Alan and folks for that. The tints on Amrish and Indar were so nice. Yeah. So I actually have, looking over Alan's portfolio here, some screenshots he has. I wonder if these are taken with the current engine or if he actually had these squirreled away from back in the day. Look at this Indar panorama. Can I make this bigger? Yeah, that's nice. Apparently, there are ways to view these things the way they used to be, huh, Rhett? Interesting. Yeah, I'm actually learning a lot in this conversation. Um, the art of Planetside, well, has always really jumped out at me, you know? Look at this. The thing about Planetside, and this is even true back in Planetside 1, is so much of the interesting, like, landscape and environment stuff is like between the bases, and you don't see it all the time. Look at this shot. How often do you see this? Probably not much. Do you guys remember, in I can't remember if it was Planetside 1 or 2. I think it might have been 1. But on Ishindar, which I think is the the non-shortened version of Indar, Shundar, there was a landscape feature that looked like a skeleton if you looked at it from far enough away. Um, I don't know what I'm talking about. Maybe some put me out of my misery by helping me remember that one.
Thanks for your patience.
Oh, hey, Ellen, no worries.
Right.
We were just looking over some of the shots from your portfolio of Indar back in the day. I was wondering whether these were taken in the current engine or if they were from back in the day.
Oh, they're from back in the day. You can tell by the god rays in the fog where the
Ah,
objects are occluding the light, causing those rays to appear.
yeah,
Like when the whole valley is in shadow, the softness you're seeing is those god rays in the fog.
makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah, but unfortunately, that was a performance hit. And back in the day, we had apex particles, which were those like crazy spiraling effects you see in a lot of games.
Apex particles?
Yeah, they're called apex. They're basically particles that react to physics, so they can bounce off the surface of a tank, you know?
Or were those like the Nvidia things?
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah, I remember there being a big deal made about that in the marketing too.
Yeah, but again, for performance reasons, everything had to be toned down or turned off.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but I
Were you,
mean, we sorry, go on.
no, no, go ahead, please.
We packed a lot of bells and whistles into the game, and then found that there were performance hits, and you have to make the game run before people can appreciate the art.
Right. And so did that I appreciate the pragmatism that you approach that with because I could imagine a world where someone who's responsible for producing the visuals would might feel some resentment at essentially a need to strip a lot of what makes it beautiful back for some
Sure,
other goal.
it's not ideal,
Uh
but
huh.
like I said, I mean, you can make the most beautiful game, but if it doesn't run, you know, if it's a gorgeous game, but people aren't having fun because the frames are terrible or they crash the desktop because their system can't handle it. What's the point in that?
Yeah, that's a good point, and it seems to be. I think in hindsight, there's a lot of questions about whether OMFG actually had long term benefits on performance, an idea that maybe some of those things over time got reintroduced in different ways, or whatever the tight performance improvements that were made at the time got loosened up
Yeah.
at the edges. I mean, which is a thing that makes sense for a game that gets iterated on so frequently.
I don't think it's that the performance gains were lost. I just think that we're adding new stuff to the game constantly. I mean,
Right.
bastions and new zones and constantly adding new armor and weapons. Um, it's not a static environment to be able to test the performance on.
Sure.
It's very dynamic. How many people are dying on the screen at the same time
Hmm.
affects performance, how many people are shooting, how much C4 is going off, how many orbital strikes are going off in a small area.
Hmm. Yeah,
So,
and what's
yeah.
an acceptable target and what's the average player's hardware gonna look like.
Yeah, the acceptable target is obviously the NC.
Yes, I think it's something most of us can get behind, right, guys? Right, chat?
As well as the NC.
Eh, yeah, they totally
Um,
agree.
but yeah, I mean, like any game, especially when you're coding your own engine, you gotta put a little column A into column B. And yeah, I would love it if the game looked as gorgeous as it did from day one, but I don't know. I mean, the engine was proprietary. The coders that originally worked on the engine, uh, handed it off to the next generation of coders
Mhm,
working on the engine.
mhm,
And we'd love to continue to iterate and improve. And we're constantly improving performance, by the way.
mhm,
Um, I'm always hearing in meetings about things that Chris Farrar, our lead programmer,
right.
is doing and tweaking in the back end to help for performance, identifying things that are affecting performance on servers, and making adjustments to improve it. But it's just the massive scale of things going on, man. It's hard to just sometimes it's just hard to identify exactly what's causing
Yeah.
that choke.
Yeah, because when you have a massive scale, you have a massive number of variables, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
And reproducibility of on that scale is just infeasible a lot of the time. Yeah, I can imagine that's a struggle and something you need to chip away at over time. Well, I mean, I've seen the benefits too. The actual, I mean, going to the modern game, the introduction of DirectX 11, and the overall how that impacted my at the time just upgraded system was remarkable. And then over time, all the little loose ends around the DX11
Yeah,
got shored up. Um, so to me, the game that right now is the most playable it's ever been, which in turn makes me able to go back and crank up some of the visuals. So it's
for
kind of
sure.
nice.
And as I commented, I'm trying to lean on what the engine does best, and that is represent things with ambient occlusion, specular surfaces, things that are shiny. Sorry, shiny surfaces look the best, um, and just create the environments that lean on those strengths.
Okay. And has your approach to so I find myself sliding. So I don't want to forget that after you worked
Mhm.
on Planetside, you also did some other work. Um,
Yeah,
because I actually really want to
after
jump to talk about the modern game, but I don't want to forget to hit on a few things.
sure,
So after maybe we can just pin that and come back to it.
sure.
After the Planetside release, you put out these three lovely continents, and then what came next for you?
Well, there was a new project being started up, and I was always interested in working on the Everquest franchise. I had
Mm,
been working on sci-fi for some time,
as an old school EverQuest player, yeah.
of course, and they were talking about some really ambitious big ideas, and so I wanted to be part of that. They were talking about a voxel destructible world, having NPC factions being able to be like moved in and out of areas, using AI in the background to like beat back the orcs, but then the orcs steadily start making a comeback, and it's all very ambitious, big idea stuff, pie in the sky.
Yeah, sounds like it.
But so the project was called initially EverQuest Next, which is for some reason some of the sort of the code name they used for a lot of their let's work on a sequel or a spin-off that's not exactly the sequel.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Um, And so, yeah, so we started working on it, and the technology was being developed at the time. And there was a lot of questions like, how do you build a giant, massive voxel world? Do we have the tools to build that? Like in Minecraft, you hit generate, it generates this random procedural world,
Mhm.
but that doesn't always necessarily mean you're going to have interesting arrangement and placement, right? I mean,
Right.
in a game of EverQuest, certain things have to be always be there in certain locations.
Yeah, you don't want it to be completely randomized 'cause that's
Yeah,
unplayable and uninteresting.
right. And completely randomized doesn't always look pretty.
Mhm.
I mean, you have to look at a game like No Man's Sky to see, wow, there's a lot of gorgeous planets, and then there's a few planets where you're like, variables that got thrown in the pot and mixed together are not very pleasing.
Mhm. Came out kind of
J-
bland or harsh.
Yeah, exactly. So you can't go 100% procedural. So we were trying to find the way to find that balance between curated content, procedural content, and fan made content because we wanted to engage the community with a game that was mutable like that.
Those are big goals. I didn't know that project had such lofty, aspirations.
Mhm.
Um, so how did working on that go? Obviously, the game never got to a consumer audience.
Yeah. So, I mean, it had its own difficulties internally, but there was also the limitations of the technology and the amount of time it would take to create the technology needed.
Mhm.
So EverQuest Next became EverQuest Landmark, and Landmark became sort of an intermediary project that would engage the community to help them create content and kind of test the tools so that we could crowdsource, sort of QA the stuff and also get people building and tell us what would make
Okay.
their building experience better.
That's super progressive. I like the sound of that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a heavily community-driven game, community interaction. We had web streams where we would showcase community builds, and some of the stuff you see on my portfolio are awards that I created to give to people in the community based on themed builds. So whenever we
That is
created a
cool.
new kit, let's say the ogre kit, we had the ogre models and we knew what they were going to look like, and we had concept art for their civilization. And we would like me and the other artists would sit down, we'd build out some voxel materials and some props, and we'd hand them to the users and say, "What do you guys think? What can you create out of this?" And we wanted to see like if their stuff was kind of samey, we needed to add more stuff to it,
Mhm.
you know? And that allowed us to keep moving forward and building new stuff while the community kind of, chewed on stuff and they could see if it was fun or underwhelming. And man, the stuff the community built always knocked our socks off. They were
Hmm.
just so talented,
Yeah.
so creative.
It's hard to match the passion of invested gamers, right?
Yeah. And then, you know, part of the goal, as I've said in the past, was that the people who had the most elaborate, best builds, you could basically select a cube around the build and then create a blueprint out of it.
Mhm.
And you could then place that. So people were selling those on the marketplace in the game. So they could sell their build for a dungeon, for a castle, for an interesting minecart,
Huh.
and they would share them. But the ones that got the best, we were going to actually use as part of the cities that the NPCs would live in.
Uh-huh.
And maybe we could find, and we were planning to put some way to say this design was built by this gamer,
Mhm.
because we really wanted to involve the community as we were making the game
That's
world.
cool.
So all like the rest of the town would be built by us devs, but there'd be one or two houses, or maybe three houses, first, second, and third, that would be built by the fans that were in that town.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. As,
And
like,
then that was the
community
plan.
showcases. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and because we didn't want to abuse the community's investment in the game or use them as free labor. It
Mhm.
was always going to be on us, but we definitely wanted to thank them for their engagement and their passion.
Yeah, I can imagine that's quite a line to ride when you're giving the community so much agency and there's so much ability to just take what they've built and make it part of your world, to give them a tribute, but not to give the appearance of, "Build our game for us."
Right.
Uh-huh. Hmm.
And,
Interesting.
yeah. So, I mean, that went along. It also faced some road bumps similar to what I described on Ghost, where as the tool kind of took on a life of its own, they weren't sure if they should be making Landmark as a creative build game like Minecraft, or
Mhm.
if it needs to be a survival game that has an economy of its own and a marketplace and adventure and scripted events.
Okay.
And so there were two camps. They were like, look, we're helping test the tool so we can make EverQuest next. And the other one's like, well, we want to keep people engaged. Let's add in new monsters and let's add in new
Ah,
scripting tech and AI and pathing. And we're like, well, we're taking development time from, pile A and putting it into pile B. There's only so much dev time to go around.
right.
And yeah, so I mean, it made some fantastic stuff, but ultimately it they didn't want to persist putting money into it, not where we couldn't see a clear end to it.
Yeah. That's a shame. It's a very interesting interesting development story
Mhm.
where there's such openness to community collaboration. It's almost like it actually took away from having a defined enough vision to push for and to actually make a compelling business case.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing with game dev, is I've been on projects where the plan has a very clear vision from the get-go,
Uh-huh.
and it's executed, and it's driven by a charismatic lead. On World of Warcraft, it was Chris Metzen. Him and
Mhm.
Sammy, they were in the meetings, they were joking around, like, without just as an anecdote, whenever there was a new zone for me to work on, we would get together with the designers, and Chris was there on front of a whiteboard, and Chris would just basically look over the synopsis of the zone, and he'd like do his pitch to us. And
Uh-huh.
he was like full of energy and he was cracking us up. He was hilarious. He was
Uh-huh.
like, all right, so these night elves are here and they're just rocking out and they're just like chilling like cider and stuff. And then these orcs are rolling in and they're like, we need this lumber to build war machines. And then the elves are like, it's like, screw you guys. Okay, so
Uh-huh.
there's conflict over there. They're trying to kill the trees, but then the elves are just totally going to be summoning this thing over here to knock those orcs on their asses.
Uh,
And he just like, yeah, it was just really funny watching how animated he was describing all
yeah,
this.
it sounds just like Betson too, not a bad impression.
It's Metzen. Metzen is like, Metzen is awesome because he's got the voice of like a like a
Uh-huh.
badass, like a, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a motorcycle gangster,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
he's like the nicest, super nicest, professional, sweetest guy you'll ever meet.
Uh-huh.
Very friendly, like no ego whatsoever. Really great guy.
Uh,
And Sammy is like a constant smile on his face. He just wants to draw and do fun stuff, and
uh-huh.
he like plays D&D and just he's just such a great. Oh man, all the Blizzard guys were just amazing.
That's awesome. What a great picture that paints in my head. Um,
So that was a segue, but what I was getting at is sometimes you have a clear vision with a charismatic lead, like Planetside 2 had
okay.
Higby and Trammell.
Yeah.
They had a very clear vision of what they wanted, especially Higby.
Yeah.
Um, and then you have games where there's an ambition to achieve something, but it hasn't been completely crystallized.
Okay.
And so at some point you have to like put boots to the ground and say, well, there's some questions we can't answer until we see what technology we have, until we see how
Hmm.
it plays. We need the
Okay.
prototype or a
It's
vertical
left open a
slice.
little bit.
Yeah. And in some cases, they're like, well, we need to create what's called a vertical slice, which is like a tiny piece of the bigger game that we
Mhm.
can experience if it's fun or not.
Yeah, it has all the stuff that's gonna be central to it.
Right. And sometimes those sort of projects can lose their way or get derailed by other things that happen
Mhm.
or personalities on the team that come
Mm.
in conflict.
Mhm.
Um, but you can never tell. Sometimes those things also just crystallize during development and everything works out. Clone Wars Adventures, we came into it with a very kind of loose vision of what we wanted, but that crystallized during development and there were no road bumps.
Hmm.
And we delivered a really fun package. In fact, I am contacted still on ArtStation by fans of the game asking me how I did certain art for certain things because they're trying to copy the art style, or
Huh.
they give me these impassioned anecdotes of times they played it when they were a kid. And I love that.
That's awesome, man. That's gotta keep you going when you get those.
Oh, yeah. I love it. Um, and
So Clone
yeah,
Wars
so
is an
that's
example of a game that came together without having a charismatic leader with a defined vision right out front. I guess
right.
from what you told me about the game, and I'm just learning it from you, that it's kind of based on having like a hub with mini games and stuff. That kind of makes sense. It seems like
Yeah.
it's a very like wheel with spokes kind of design, and
Mhm.
um and I guess the question I want to ask you, and you don't have to answer this, is can you give me an example of a game that I guess Landmark then coming back is an example of a game where that didn't go well.
Yeah, and there was more I mean, there was a lot of factors. There was, some ambitions that were different between the personalities on the team. There
Hmm.
was technology that was promised but never manifested.
Okay.
There was, limitations that became apparent only once the technology had been made.
Uh huh.
Like, when you have this really high resolution mutable world and people are constantly manipulating the terrain, that's a lot of data being sent up and downstream,
Okay.
and keeping that synced for everyone standing around watching it before it starts getting choppy
Yeah.
is hard to figure out.
Yep. That makes sense. 'Cause, yeah, character synchronization is a big thing in interpolation and stuff like that, right?
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know a lot about this stuff. I have a layperson's understanding, but if the whole world can be muted and, um, so at any given point when you're in a 3D game, you're not rendering and seeing the whole world, right? You're seeing the
right.
part of it that matters to you. So whenever you travel, you would have to re-download what all the changes that happened since the last time you were there, right?
Exactly, and that's expensive for paying for the servers to send all
Mhm.
that data through. As the company running it, like, we're sending all that data to people,
Hmm.
so we're paying for that,
You don't
and
think
the
about server
more
bandwidth costs being a limiting
yeah,
factor, but it
it
makes
became a
sense.
reality for a game like that. So yeah, the game kind of unfortunately, dissolved,
Mm.
and then development ceased. There were a lot of fans who reached out, people who really enjoyed playing that game, fantastic creative people who in fact, some of the artists that, we worked with, some of the community members, they've still taken that original vision and are running with it. Um, I can't remember his, ID on Twitter, but one of the artists that was really passionate about the game is still trying to remake the game in Unity.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so the dream, keeping it alive.
Gotta love the Unity remakes. Yeah,
And
that's
then
a
from yeah, sorry, go on.
oh, I was just gonna reminisce how interesting it is, the scene of, some of these old games, g the current technology getting to the point where people who are passionate hobbyists can bring back some of these old games that previously could only be deployed and run by,
Sure.
you know, uh, big companies. Um,
Yeah,
it
I mean, something like Landmark isn't going to be as easy as something else. That was a lot of proprietary technology that
yeah.
never became public.
And of course, the Unity version of it is gonna be more of like a visual showcase than an
Sure.
actual slice of the functional game.
Yeah, wouldn't
Um,
have any of the back end.
but yeah, I don't know. You're mentioning that made me think of it though. Like, gaming has gotten. I mean, Alan, you know this better than anyone. Like, gaming has gotten enormous since you
Yeah.
were doing tech support for StarCraft. Like,
Yeah, I mean, it's a multi-billion dollar industry. It's beating film sometimes.
yeah, I think I saw that number the other day, and it blew my mind because in some ways, culturally, gaming still lags behind more traditionally accepted art forms like music and
Mhm.
cinema. Um, I think it'll take a generational shift for that attitude to change. And I wonder what we'll see come out then. And
Well, I mean, you're
now we're
seeing
really
that.
tangenting. But sorry, go ahead.
No, you're seeing some of that already. I mean, like I can't remember the name of the company, the one that did Detroit Human, Detroit Become Human.
I'll just look it up because I can't
I think
remember
it's
either.
Quantic Dream or something like that.
That sounds right.
Um, I mean, you have studios out there trying to tell serious stories and create gameplay experiences. You have The Last of Us, you know, you have
Mm-hmm.
stories, games that are trying to create a very immersive cinematic experience. You know, you've got your fun goofball games, you've got your Mario parties, you've got your shooter games that put you in the thick of action, but those are easy to pick up and put down, and have emergent. Uh, they have emergent elements that wow, it's crazy. This happened because I did this, and this guy just happened to be walking around the corner, and that was a fun experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are games where every little moment is scripted to really like resonate with you,
Yeah,
and it sticks with you.
yeah,
Yeah,
to have the maximum like emotional valence.
sure. Bioshock, right? The big
Yeah.
reveals. Bioshock Infinity at the end of it, I was just like, I just played through like a 40-hour long Twilight Zone episode.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
great.
It really does have that vibe. Yeah, the batteries are getting pushed. I mean, as long as I'm guessing that as long as the interest is there, it's just gonna keep getting bigger. Um, I I'm guessing you are, have always just been so compelled by virtual worlds. For me, like, the thing that made me, like, kind of click when it comes to gaming is the first time I got my hands on Mario 64 at
Mhm.
a Toys R Us, a kiosk. Like, I just had something turn over in my mind when I did that, and I was like, "There can be a world in there?" Like, I was I let's see, 64 came out in '96, so I would have been, like, 12 or 13 when that happened.
Yeah.
And that for me was what got it all started. Um, so
I loved video games as a kid went
yeah.
over to my friend's house to play, but the thing that really made me wanna be in video game development was the RPGs, because they created these virtual worlds that sucked you in.
Uh-huh.
I mean, you had your old Ultimas on the PC, right?
Mhm.
And you had your, JRPGs. I remember, like, one of my earlier JRPGs was Phantasy Star and Phantasy Star 2 on the
Mhm.
Genesis,
Mhm.
on the Master System, and, like, they really suck you in. Now, full disclosure, I was still a kid and anime was new, and like all of those tired tropes that today I can't stand because I've seen them 1,000 times were like blowing my mind. It's like, what?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
elf girl who's also a cat girl or something like is about to die and the villain's gonna get away.
Yeah.
Like you don't see that in Western animation.
Uh-huh.
But now you're like, oh yeah, I know this is gonna happen.
The curse of the internet is we all learn from each other so quickly these days.
Yeah. Ignorance is bliss sometimes.
Yeah. So, tell me a little bit about, the games of your youth. What were the ones that really stand out to you as, like, being inspirational or really, important to you?
I really enjoy the Ultimas. I
Yeah.
love the world that they were creating, the persistent elements. I mean, the Ultimas were heavily influenced by the pulp fiction of the 70s, like John Carter of Mars.
Oh,
The
yeah.
idea that you're the avatar who lives on Earth, and these moon gates pull you into this alternate world where you are the hero. It's basically John Carter coming from Earth to Mars to be, the hero, go on these crazy adventures. Then he comes back to Earth. Then he goes back.
Could you tell for those of us who, like, don't know much about Ultima, and I might be a little bit like one of them, could
Sure.
you just tell me, like, a little bit about the game? Like, what is it?
So Ultima was an old school fantasy game. Initially, it started in like the really early computer days where graphics looked like Atari graphics,
Mhm.
and it was just like the early Final Fantasies were just like that. Like little on a grid, moving your little icon character around. And the Ultimas just started being innovative. They were made in the garage by Richard Garriott,
Mhm.
and he was pushing boundaries on what RPGs could do and carrying interesting systems, but he also persisted the mythology between his games as he created sequels.
Mhm.
And the concept was that every time you return, you're the same protagonist returning, but time has passed in the world of Britannia.
Mhm.
So new villains pop up, new magic, new technology, but you've just like you put down the video game and you went to school for a couple months, and then the next video game came out, you picked it up, and it's like, you were the Avatar. You've been gone for whatever 100 years. I can't believe you're back. And
Uh-huh.
so he really liked to blur those lines, like kind of
Yeah.
make it a meta experience, and it
That's
was
neat.
fun. And in fact, in the later Ultima games, there's literally an opening cinematic where the protagonist is sitting at his computer, and there's a full moon outside, and he sees like a lunar eclipse. And as he gets up and steps out into his backyard, there's like a circle of stones, and a moon gate opens, taking him into Britannia.
Of course.
So it's great.
Playing with
But like I
reality.
said, yeah, it leans on those pulp fiction tropes,
Okay.
and it plays to the fantasies of that era of pencil and paper RPG
Uh-huh.
gamers.
And I know you mentioned that we're looking at, like, Atari level graphics in those days, but did anything about the art and or environment design of those games, stick with you?
Not so much the
Okay.
Ultima games, maybe
Okay.
Ultima Online, but it was fun to just explore. And games like Ultima Online and Ashram's Call, they were these real-time giant worlds,
Mhm.
and you really wanted to see what was over the next horizon. And
Mhm.
someone had been there, but I mean, sometimes you would stumble upon loot on the floor from monsters that were killed, and you're like, "Oh, someone's here."
Uh-huh.
And if there was PvP, you had to be on your guard, you
Uh-huh.
know? But even if it wasn't, like, maybe the big boss that you couldn't get past had been taken out by that hero.
Yeah. Yeah, what do you think about, so what you just described is like the explorer's experience approaching
Yeah,
these online worlds. In some ways, I kind of feel like the post-social media, post-Twitch experience of these online worlds is at a place where it's very hard to explore anything anymore because
I agree.
things are
Yeah.
so well mapped by people in advance and shared and circulated. And before you ever get to a point where you need to worry about how to conquer a dungeon, someone else has done it and told the entire player base what the best way to do it. And if you don't do it the way they say, then you have to deal with those social consequences. Like,
Yeah, I agree with you. I recently picked up Divinity Original Sin 2 because I
okay,
heard good things. I couldn't finish the first one. It
mhm,
was just not my thing. But the second one seems better, but the second one also throws like 70 quests at you in the starter town,
yikes,
and you can easily fail them where you can't recover. You'll never get the reward. That NPC has now died, and you're like, I feel like I'm constantly hitting these roadblocks, and I felt the urge to go online and look it up and figure out the right way to do it.
yeah,
Because I mean, being it was so unusual to be given a quest as the hero in the game, but then immediately, just from a dialogue choice, suddenly fail that quest. It was
right.
jarring.
That's very old
Yeah,
school.
yeah.
Um, what you just described is making me think of my experience going back to play the World of Warcraft re-release in 2019 when Classic came out. I went back with a coworker buddy of mine, and we re-experienced the grind to max level, and we did the entry level raids before we called it quits. And I got through like the first 20 or 30% of the level up experience before I said screw it, and I just got a modern questing mod that told me where to go for everything
Oh,
because before that, I was reading everything and I was getting all my clues from inside the game, and I wasn't looking things up, and I was like really trying to be in the world.
that's so funny because coming from EverQuest, where so much of it was left in mystery because of the original design was crude, so they didn't have the mechanisms to convey information.
Uh huh.
You actually had to walk up to an NPC. You had to say "hail," watch the text that they say, pick out the word, and then ask them questions about the things that they say to
Uh
try
huh.
and find the dialogue tree.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it was more hardcore, but it was also more rewarding when you found it, or even as the community stumbled upon hidden gems that no one had found for years.
Because things can be more hidden when
Right.
things are more, um,
Obfuscated, yeah.
yeah, obfuscated. Yeah.
Um, and then I was worried working on World of Warcraft that it was just too handholdy, that the game felt every time I logged in after this is after 4 years of playing it in development.
Hmm.
By
Hmm.
the time it got released, I was like, I'm just like logging in, I'm doing a checklist of tasks and I'm logging out. I'm not
Hmm.
really thinking. And that kind of bugged me, and which is why I kind of stopped playing the game after a while because I burned out on just logging in to follow that checklist.
To do quests. Yeah. Essentially.
Yeah, and it kind of just I don't know, I yearned for that discovery, like, where am I gonna find that next quest?
Hmm.
Am I in the right place? I don't know. There's not just an arrow pointing me there?
Do you think there are any games that are doing a good job of that these days?
I don't know, man. That's a discussion for someone who's better at game design than me. Um,
I don't know. I find this
I have a
fascinating.
personal opinions. Um,
Yeah.
I don't think any game nails it. I think that games like Elder Scrolls Online and Fallout 76,
Uh huh.
um, are a little too handholdy for me. They're sticker book guests where they basically walk into a zone and you're immediately given the first breadcrumb and they just pattern themselves after WoW too much.
Hmm.
You know, I think everyone wanted a world where you weren't led to that next quest. You literally had to run out there and stumble upon it
Hmm.
organically.
Hmm.
You know, that's
Yeah.
what's lost in these MMOs today. No sense of exploration and
Yeah.
reward for exploring.
Yeah. It's interesting you shared that insight about playing the original World of Warcraft after working in development for multiple years and feeling like you were too handheld, like it was too polished, like there was no sense of mystery. I think in the modern era, people look back at that version of the game and see it as more old, see it as the old school, see it as like as like the unpolished experience compared to what it's now become over 15 years of development. Um, and yes, the reason I prompted that question is like, what's doing it well? Because that feeling of discovery is something that I have struggled with a lot in recent years, especially the more I understand about what I'm looking for. Um,
But it's also yeah, that's what it is. It's what are you looking for in your experience?
uh-huh,
Some people wanna sit down and play Mario Brothers, and some people wanna sit down and forget they're in a video game and that they're being they're vicariously living through the hero on an adventure. And I think that people who are a little bit older, who grew up with more pen and paper games, where they're
mhm,
used to using their imagination, used to being the hero rather than watching a movie about the hero.
right,
These modern games, you're sort of along for the ride. You're not the
yeah,
protagonist. You're
yeah.
along for the ride with the protagonist.
The Yeah, a lot of games too really worry about, like, making sure players feel like the power fantasy, like,
Yep.
making you feel powerful, feel like Spider-Man, right? Um,
Well, that was in the early development of WoW. That was one of the things that they talked about was how like where's WoW different than other MMOs? Like we throw a bunch of mobs at you, and other MMOs, one mob at your level could kill you. It could be a prolonged fight for several minutes.
mhm,
In WoW, you had to feel like you were a badass from the get go. So the first thing you can take on three wolves, you could take on two of the kobolds in the mine
mhm,
in Goldshire or whatever.
mhm,
And then as you go outside of your level appropriate zone, yeah, you're in pitched battles with one on one. But as long as you're at your level appropriate area, you're always a badass able to just like grab hordes of monsters and AoE them down.
mhm.
And ESO does the same thing.
Yeah, I think all AAA games do that.
Yeah. Well,
Like,
because WoW showed it worked.
yeah, and I think I'm guessing well, okay, uh, how to phrase this idea. It seems to me, from my observation, that it showed that there was a much bigger audience out there, people who wanted game
Yeah.
experiences that were adjacent to the kind of gaming that was happening back 20 years ago, but that knocked down the barriers of accessibility. Like, I want to experience this game, but I don't really want to have to understand my stats. I want to
Totally.
play this
And I
game,
don't
but I don't really want to ever die.
yeah, and I don't want to have to spend 6 hours to feel a little bit of progress. I want to be able to log in for
Yeah.
30 minutes, feel I've accomplished something, and log out.
I've been taste testing the new World of Warcraft expansion. And one of the and I also like just watch the monitor the community conversation about it is one of the biggest things that's going on is the question of is the game giving enough loot?
Mm.
And it kind of I find it a little repulsive. It's like uh um it's like am I getting enough candy from each
Yeah.
door when I go trick or treating? It's kind of it seems almost childlike. Like,
It's the
they've
power
boiled
curve.
down what they want out of the experience
Yeah.
so far that it has no capability to surprise them anymore.
That's the difficulty of an aging game is not just the power creep, but the expectation, the
Mhm,
sense of reward, you know? You don't get like it has to be now like a mythical, legendary, transmogged, epic dropped from a world boss that only spawns once in a month ending and why, I don't know.
yeah,
But
yeah.
it's it's like it has to be something ridiculous before you feel a real sense of accomplishment for getting it.
Mhm, and also one of the other confounding factors too that emerges is and each game approaches this differently, is the role of microtransactions and how you bring in things to the game from outside economies that are not about
Yeah.
putting in the effort and getting lucky or being good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the Planetside dealt with that same thing. It's
Mhm,
how much do we monetize power, and how much do we keep the power curve fairly flat? Because we want people to feel that their purchases are meaningful. If they're
mhm,
spending real money on something, you don't want to just buy something and feel like, ah, why did I just waste that money? You know. So, for the most part, you'll see a lot of similar stats on weapons because we don't want to allow people who throw money at the game to be stronger than everyone else.
mhm,
Not like maybe a ounce, but that's it.
yeah. Planetside seems like it's taken a somewhat unique perspective when it comes to um, selling. Um, I don't want to say selling power because that's not really what it is. it's selling gameplay as opposed to just like pure cosmetics like an
Right.
Overwatch would do, where nothing you buy in Overwatch is going to affect the gameplay at all. Um,
Personally, I'd like to see more stuff like the Punisher.
Punisher is a fun gun.
That's what I'm saying. It's stuff that can change the way an encounter goes.
Uh huh.
You know, when you have like an impulse or a a vacuum black hole effect, like suddenly that bottleneck encounter in the hallway is different.
Uh huh.
And so I think that that doesn't really make you more powerful because you can't take out people. Like if you're out in the open, that impulse isn't going to do anything for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So these are like situational guns that can change the way combat flows. But it's hard to tune weapons when you're fighting one dude or you're fighting 700 dudes. You know?
Yes. Yeah. Because there could be one of those in a fight, or there could be 700 of those in a fight.
Yeah,
And what's that look like?
exactly.
That's got to be tough. Um, and one of the interesting things too. So one of the and when it comes to Planetside, one of the things I try to always be cognizant of is like um, the different parts of the community that kind of come out with different things that they want out of the game. And the one I have the most familiar with is the hardcore infantry scene, who
Mm.
love headshots. Like it's what they need to survive. They love headshots, and they need the time to kill to feel right. And um, I think that there can be a tendency to like feel things that add noise to the game of
Right.
being the best mover and headshotter can feel bad to those players.
That is an excellent point. Sorry, my wife just texted me. Can I have just a minute?
I need a minute too. Let's take 5.
Great. Let's take 5.
Great. I'll be right back, folks. Help me remember what we were talking about when I get back, okay? Be right back. Hey, folks, we're back from our break. Me, Deeg, here, Basementside, chatting with Alen Lapidis, principal artist from Rogue Planet Games, working on Planetside too. What were we talking about?
I believe we were talking about the gameplay experience with people who want to just purists who just want to be infantry shooting.
Yeah, it sounded like you had
They
something
don't
you
want
wanted to say about that.
Yeah, it's difficult when you want to add or change anything to the flow of a game that it has a player base that's been with it for so long.
Hmm.
Because while players constantly want, there are some players who want innovation, who want to mix things up. And then there's players that are like purists who I know the role of each weapon. I know the role how to react in every situation. I know every base layout, and I'm comfortable with my knowledge. It empowers me. It lets me have a great kill count,
Hmm.
and anything that shakes that up, I don't like it. You
Hmm.
know, so it's kind of hard. I mean, I can understand that because there's different people who want different things from even a shooter game.
Hmm.
I like shooter games where things are a little bit more bullet spongy, more the Borderlands
Like
style.
Borderlands. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's people who like I remember when Planetside 2 was first starting out, like the time to kill was just so fast. You felt like you were getting like two tapped, you
Hmm.
know? And that didn't appeal to me as a gamer. But I also knew that I can't remember which game it was, Call of Duty, if it
Battlefield.
was Battlefield, like
Yeah.
there was a very fast time to kill on there as well. And people like that.
Hmm.
But those games, when you die, you come back like 50 feet from where you died.
Hmm.
But when the map is this vast, death stings so much more.
Hmm.
So it's a little harder to stomach being taken out of the fight.
Right.
Anyway, that's just my 2 cents because I personally would like to see things like guns that, like create damage over time effects, resistances to kinetic, thermal, blah, blah, blah.
Hmm.
Kind of add some variety, mix up the meta a bit so it doesn't just become, do I have shields or health? And that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Add some new toys to the sandbox.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that very same phrase is something that I used when I was talking to Rel to describe like bastions coming in. the Colossus
Right.
coming in. Those are some examples of major changes to the way the battle works in Planetside. You worked on those, right?
Yeah. Chris Bishop and uh, can't remember who did the Bastion, but we worked with an outsourcer to model the Bastion,
Mhm.
and then Chris kind of cleaned it up, prepped it for game, did all the engineering needed to get it in. And for the escalation update, the hell was I doing for the escalation update?
Was it
Sanctuary. I was focusing on Sanctuary.
Yeah. So, okay. Escalation came with Sanctuary, with Bastions. It came on the wake. I'm gonna back transition, then we're gonna re-transition to this. See how clever
Okay,
this is. um, Escalation came on the heels of the announcement that Planetside Arena was gonna be closed down.
right.
Another project that you worked on. So I know that after Landmark, you worked on H1Z1 for a little while, and then on Planetside Arena. I'm
Mhm.
a little more familiar with Planetside IP. I think I want to ask you a little bit about Arena, about
Sure.
your work on it, what it was like to work on that project.
Well, in the beginning, Tony Morton, Carto, he had a very clear vision for what he wanted. He wanted variable match themes and structures,
Mhm.
but he wanted a game where you basically just pay a reasonable upfront cost, and then we provide all sorts of different matches and a battle pass with cos
Mhm.
because we'll need income to sustain the game in the long run. But the idea was that the battle pass would just be cosmetics and that you could get the battle pass items through full gameplay. And it
Okay.
seemed like a fair system. Um, and we wanted to throw in a lot, they had a lot of creative ideas for how this would play that were not your traditional VR.
Right.
Um, in fact, ideas which I've seen more modern games suddenly implement. So that we
Hmm.
knew that those ideas were fun and solid when we were testing them.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, it, when you're making a multi-million dollar game, it's
Mm.
not just your baby. And
Mhm.
so there's other people who, have stake in the project, and they want to see the project leaning a little bit more on the BR side
Uh-huh.
because of the success of BR games. They wanted the BR mode out first.
Mhm.
They had some other adjustments to the model, but ultimately we were hoping that the BR would be released. It would get some good feedback, and then we'd be able to release the other modes like
Yeah.
Massive Conflict and a
Maybe
couple
a
of the
jump
others
off
that they
point.
had. Yeah, jump off point. But at the same time, Apex came out as well,
Right.
and Apex was so well received and such a polished game that it really sort of it was an insurmountable challenge to
Mhm.
make something that was more polished and more fun in BR. If we had
Mhm.
come to the table with something other than BR, like some of our other modes, we wouldn't have to compete with them. But
Right.
that's just where we were at the time.
Yeah. Well, as an outsider who from like me personally, I'm not much of a battle royale guy. So it's
Yeah,
it's
nor
it's
am I.
even as I saw Arena being marketed that way, I just said, doesn't look like Planetside to me. Um,
Yeah,
I do look at what happened with a quite a high amount of sympathy though, because it is at the end of the day a Planetside game, and it did at the end of the day not really get a chance to stretch its legs. It seems like.
yeah. Even the Bastion interior that I'd made was designed for expandability because we
Hmm.
had plans on what more it would be done for. We had plans for God, some of the ideas we had was there was going to be a team versus team mission that took place on a decaying orbital rig that was slowly descending towards the planet's surface,
Uh huh.
and fragments of it were going to break off and like burn off as it was
Like
falling.
progressively over time, it would change the
Yeah,
actual
because
arena.
the match was had a limited amount of time. So as the planet got bigger and you were descending towards the planet, and parts of the station started breaking off, and the playfield got smaller, it was going to be very cinematic and really fun.
I love
And it
that
was just a
idea of a
yeah,
really visual indicator of match progress, like with the
totally.
planet getting bigger. That's awesome.
It was going to be basically a two fort with a shrinking arena.
Okay. Yeah. Wow, you just called out 2 for it. That hits me right in the
Sure.
heart, man. I'm an old school Team
Yeah,
Fortress Classic junkie. Do you
I
know
love
that?
Team Fortress. That's
Oh,
the sort of like that's the sort of gunplay balance and class balance, personally, I'm not a designer, so it doesn't matter what I say, but personally, I would love if PlanetSide 2's heavies felt heavy, if their scouts felt more agile, but I also don't know how the hell that would play with 700 people on your screen.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to imagine scouts flying around in at that scale.
Mm,
But yeah, I have a warm place in my heart for that approach to team shooter balance too.
yeah, for sure, and that's why I love big ideas and big cinematic stuff, but I'm not a designer because I don't think about all the actual realities, you know,
Sure.
of it all,
So
and so, yeah.
what did you end up working on? So you said you worked on the Bastion interiors. I'm actually showing that off here, which
Yeah,
are
the
gorgeous,
oh, thank you. Yeah, the Bastion interior. I also did the loot crate room where the robot opens up your crates.
right?
And I did a lot of work on the Echoes of Amarish map,
uh
the skies, the some of the props and ecosystems, and what else? And then a lot of just prop placement and area design.
What are some of the things that you wanted to do with Arena visually to distinguish it from the Planetside 2?
Well, we definitely wanted to create themed sections of the map. In Planetside 2, Amarish is pretty much just Scottish Highlands rubble
Mhm,
and rock and gravel and grassy everywhere. We wanted to have distinct sections so you could tell where you dropped and which way you had to go, which is why we had that like central peak mountain in the middle of the map that you could see from anywhere.
mhm.
So we were trying to create a lot of like ways to easily orient yourself without having to even open the map.
Yep,
Like
makes
colored
sense.
buildings with numbers on them so that when you roll into a camp, you could call things out to your teammates.
Mm,
So there were a lot of cool ideas that actually I would like to see in Planetside. Um, what else? Yeah, we wanted to do different skyboxes for the different areas. So when you roll into the crystal area, things are a little more glowy and shimmery.
mhm.
You roll into the war torn area and everything's kind of smoky and the craters are billowing smoke. But yeah, and then if you scroll down, you can see some of the alternate skies I created for like nighttime games that had animated clouds in the distance with like lightning shooting down, auroras that were streaming in the sky.
Oh, that is cool stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I was going for big cinematic visual elements, and one of the
Yeah,
nice things about Planetside Arena is that the art style, even if you look at it now,
yeah.
it really still holds up.
It pops.
It pops, and it's soft enough where it still feels not like you're not looking at WoW, but you don't see like the pixelated, crunchy textures,
Mhm, mhm.
and that's one of the benefits of slightly tweaking the art style a little bit.
Those trees.
Yeah,
Yeah, it looks good, Alan. It's a shame we never got to see more of it.
yeah. Fortunately, it's not really a lot I can use from it either,
There's
just
not
because
much you can
everything.
use from it?
No,
Technical
because I
reasons
mean,
or
well, I mean, like the tree design, these like trees with canopies that are solid so you can't shoot through them.
Mhm.
That would seem kind of weird in a Planetside game
Yeah,
where traditionally light assault can get up in trees.
yeah. I imagine just also because of scale differences, they're different. All d
Yeah.
all kinds of technical differences that have artistic ramifications.
I mean, I would love to. Like, we updated all the crates, we updated a lot of the props. I love the colored buildings and the number plaques that we put on them to help you call out when you enter a base.
Mhm.
So yeah, there was a lot of good stuff.
Yeah,
It's a shame it didn't work out. I know it hit some people hard because they had a lot of hope for it.
yeah. So, Planetside Arena didn't work out. It sounds like you just pretty much, went right from Arena over to Planetside 2 then?
Yeah.
Back, returning to it. What was it like to return to Planetside 2 after being off of it?
Exciting because speaking with Rel, who had been like single-handedly leading the charge to keep the game alive, and Nick Silva was running the game for a while, and Rel was incredible because I mean he was just like pissed when he didn't get the resources he needed. And so for him, it was like Christmas when he got all of these artists and programmers to come on. And now the game could like he revivified the game, with
Uh-huh.
all the things that they wanted to do. And it wasn't just Michael. It was we had a bunch of designers. Tony was still, working with us on it, and
Right.
um, we also had. I'm sorry, I can't recall who else was in the room, but they had a lot of big, ambitious ideas. What with the bastions and the social space of the sanctuary,
Right.
being able to actually start giving lore hints at
Oh,
updates
I love
coming.
that stuff.
Yeah, me too. I love those robots on the sanctuary.
Mm. Mhm.
Um, and then, we had some big plans for what we were going to do with Esamir and how it tied into the lore and where it's going still, because the campaign isn't finished.
Right, right.
And I'm excited about like showcasing heroes and villains, because that's one thing Planetside never really did was give you a sense of people who are not just the feet on the ground soldiers.
Mhm. Yeah, like the generals, like people
Hmm.
the bases are named after, stuff like that.
Totally. Yeah. And what's going on back in the sanctuaries, or sorry, what's going on back in the homeland, right? Like the TR is just a bunch of human civilizations that the
Uh-huh,
TR runs as a fascist government.
uh-huh.
The NC are basically like spooks hired by corporations to break TR stranglehold on the economy.
Mhm,
And the VS are like Briggs was running the show, but the VS War Machine has basically taken away all of his control, where was preaching that Vanu was coming back, we have to ascend, and now that whoever's running the VS is sort of like, yeah, 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 Briggs, we got wars to fight, so take a seat, buddy.
Yeah, yeah. Stay in the back and read your books, it's fine.
Yeah, yeah, just play with your toys.
Oh my god, I love all the little points of tension that I'm hearing that could
Yeah,
be introduced story-wise. It's gotta
I just
be
want more.
it's gotta be hard to introduce that stuff to a game where people are so used to just, like, logging into the warp gate and shooting their friends.
Right.
Like
I mean, I want to see the game a little bit more like Destiny, where it's telling a story.
mhm, mhm,
You do log in. Your moment to moment gameplay is the crazy combined arms combat and base capturing and ranking up, but I want there to be an overarching story so that every season things are changing,
mhm,
maps are changing, like it's great that you've memorized that base layout. We can add a new map or we can go back and change that base.
mhm. And the nice thing about that too is it gives hooks for other kinds of players
Right?
who maybe traditionally have had a hard time hooking in. Um, like one of the things that always makes me sit up and pay attention when I look at dev streams is like, oh, we're looking at adding lore, we're looking at adding more story stuff. Um, it's hard to get that stuff in there, but that's what worlds are made of at the end of the
Yeah.
day. We're all built to be social storytellers. And an endless arena has a certain appeal to it. But um, a lot of people just want to be in worlds, and I know I'm certainly one of them.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I love the campaigns and the missions, because they set the groundwork for storytelling
Yeah.
and they give us an opportunity to do isolated events that don't have to be game wide. You know, the
Hmm.
campaigns for the most part took place only on Esamir. I think a couple of the missions had you going to different continents, but it's kind of nice when we blow the dust off of a entire old continent, change things around because something has happened, and there's a campaign that gives you some cool, unique rewards that you're only ever going to get from that campaign.
Hmm.
And then when you see some dude wearing some cool piece of armor or badge or something, and you ask, "Where did you get that? Was that on sale?" He'll be like, "No, man, that was for the campaign back in 2020, 2021. You can't
Hmm.
get it anymore."
Hmm.
I love that stuff.
Yeah, it's good. It's good because it means that those little bits of one of the things I used to love about old school MMORPGs, like before transmog and transmutation systems became really popular, is the fact that what you saw on a person could tell you a story of experiences that they've had.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
I played a warrior in vanilla World of Warcraft, and I did raiding, and so I had the experience of wearing feeling awful about wearing leather and male gear to be the to do the best performance, and progressing through like the raid tier of on Courage with all the bug plate armor that
Mhm.
is just like, why would you want to wear this? Like, but I ended up disliking it so much that it turned into a kind of love. Like those items told a story that now, and I think it's so important when you're talking about virtual worlds to make sure that the choices players can make give them the opportunity to tell a story that actually it commutes meaning. And
Totally. Yeah,
the
I mean, you wanna
more,
be able to express yourself.
yeah. Anyway, that's a very vague hope I have whenever I jump into a game these days. But anyway, Alan, we just have a few minutes left. I think maybe a good place to end it would be to prompt you to ask, like, what great question should I have asked you that I have not yet asked you?
You should have asked me about the containment site that's
Okay,
coming down the pipe.
the
Yeah.
the containment site, is this like a new base?
It is, it's the new superstructure that we're working on as part of the, next campaign update.
Uh
We've
huh.
teased the exterior block out, and, it's that big vertical tapered
Oh, the huge
building.
pylon looking thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but most of the gameplay is going to be below ground.
Uh huh. That's hype.
So I'm able to create a unique skybox for it, create different moods, create themed rooms, so you're not just looking at the same walls and boxes everywhere.
Uh huh.
One of the things that I really want to do, we've discussed that, is we want to break up line of sight with verticality, not just blockers.
Okay.
So when you roll into a room, you might be coming in at 45-degree angles instead of 90-degree angles. I want to
Mm-hmm.
avoid 90-degree turns to check your corners.
Mm-hmm.
I want clear distinction between what's covered and what's not. So you don't run up to a railing and think you're covered and not.
Right.
And more vaulted ceilings. I want light assault to have some maneuverability.
Ooh, yeah, I like the sound of that.
Yeah. So we're gonna have rooms that are like lower roofs and then rooms that are cavernous. We're gonna have visibility from one room into another part of the base, but you can't get there
Mm-hmm.
until like you break through a section.
Oh, so like progressive, actually, like the layout slightly changing as you capture things?
Well, more like you can peekaboo where the goal is, kind of
I
like
get it.
in the old Team Fortress shooters, where you can see point C through a window, but you can't get to point C
Yeah.
unless you go through
You
point
gotta go
B.
down the hallway and up the stairs and
Yeah,
whatever to get there, but you can kind of peek
totally.
in. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like the way that all the our existing buildings and bases have you in these boxes with very limited visibility,
Mhm.
forcing you to feel like a rat in a maze.
Mhm.
So I want you to be able to preview where you're going. I want things like pipes and floor markers to lead you to the sections that you want to go to.
Mhm.
So if you're new to the space and someone says, go to whatever, I don't know, let go to the water section, there's some sort of markers on the ground leading you there,
Mhm.
or there's marking on the wall. And
Yep.
when you enter a room, there's like pipes and other hints that tell you where the exit of the room is,
Mhm.
so you can immediately know where the heck the exit is. You can better assess where the threats are. So yeah, I'm just trying to mix things up, make it more modern, more like you'd see in a modern day shooter.
Mhm. Yeah, the way you describe that makes the some of the existing point and base layouts seem kind of primitive by comparison. Everything you just described there sounds amazing.
Yeah, I mean, there was an ambition that the original base layouts were going to be more diverse and more themed via props,
Mhm.
but during Operation Make Game Faster, they pulled out a lot of those unique props because they saw performance gain from having the same props
Mhm.
everywhere. But unfortunately, that just means you roll into a lot of rooms where it's just stacks of crates everywhere.
Right. That's the old stack of crates.
Yeah.
And the variation is where are the crates,
Yeah,
which
exactly.
is less interesting than what everything you just talked about with vertical sight lines and railings and peaks and all that stuff. Well, I very much look forward to getting a peek at that, hopefully soon.
Yeah,
And
when I'm finished off one of the nice sections and everything's sealed up and I'm happy, I'll post a screenshot.
what the whole reason I got to know you, Alan, is because you've been posting that stuff on your Twitter. So
Yeah.
tell folks where they can find you.
I'm at A Lapidis on Twitter, and I'm on ArtStation if you check out Alen Lapidis. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm always posting stuff. I keep Twitter pretty lighthearted. I reply to anybody who has questions for me if I can. Sometimes the questions are not in my discipline, so I can't really help. But yeah, I mean, I like to share cool stuff and get people excited.
So shoot your questions over to Alan all about the upcoming containment site.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be good. Well, thank you, Alan. This has been a pleasure. I'm Deeg. This is Basementside Chats, twitch.tv/DeegTV, Deeg and other places. Thanks again to you, Alan, and thanks to everyone for hanging out. This has been fun.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye.